Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, and having had the chance to work as a counselor and as a therapist over the last few years, I today wish to talk about how we are all trying very hard to be very good kids, to be very good children. Whether we are 2 years old, whether we are 5 years old, whether we are 8 years old, whether we are 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, 30 years old, 37 years old, 40 years old, 45 years old, 50 years old, 55 years old, 60 years old, 65, and even 70 and 75 years old. Though that might be our chronological age, internally, it's a little child inside of us that is also called as the inner child, that is just wanting to be a good boy or a good girl. And unfortunately, there's no third gender over here. So it's a very binary system of good boy and a good girl that forms the basis of the beliefs, of the imprints that forms those beliefs, that gets inscripted, that gets embossed, that gets embedded within our subconscious, which is why beliefs are also called as subconscious beliefs. They are within the levels of our subconscious, that is, out of our conscious awareness. That is like a huge submarine which is moving under the oceans and is not visible to our naked eyes. And since that is not visible, we kind of assume that it's not there. And that assumption that it's not there does not make it go away. It just tells us that it's not been revealed to us, that it's not in our awareness, which is why we do not have an understanding of it, because we do not have the eyesight for it. And since we do not have the eyesight for it, we do not have any insight about it. Now, over here, I've said it in both metaphorical and in literal ways. So, what does it mean when I essentially said that we all are trying very hard for a large chunk of our lives to be the good boy and the good girl? Who tells us when we are born as to what a good boy or a good girl is all about? Well, it's the outside world, the outside information that becomes a part of our inner world, of our inner psyche, of our inner or rather internal dialogues for a very large part of our life, is also something that was transferred onto the family culture, onto the family individuals from people who came before them. And in a way, it's then the same chapters, the same lessons that gets repeated over and over and over again from one generation to the next. Which also means that these generations have then also been informed, their beliefs have also been informed by the societal culture, by the culture of that place, by the religion that they follow or do not follow, by their teachers, and thereby the schools itself. And then, in a way, it becomes a social web. Now, this social web, right from the family to the society and the community outside, then keeps telling us in very obvious and in very subtle ways, in very overt and in very passive ways, as to what makes for a good kid, as to what makes for a good child, as to what makes for a good girl and a good boy. And once again, these then become a part, an embodied part, which is present within our bodies as a part of our subconscious beliefs, which then becomes our operating systems. And weirdly enough, operating systems that are not even in our eyesight, just like the submarine, and thereby we don't have the insight about them, at least many a times, or most times. So let's consider some of the movies which tells us, which informs us as to what being a good boy or a good girl is all about and how that is operating our lives for at least a large chunk of our lifetime, or at least this lifetime. So if we consider the example through the movie Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway, wherein Rani Mukherjee plays the protagonist, and at one point in time goes on to express, what did I do so wrong when all I've been trying to do is be the good girl, is be the good woman? And she quite explicitly goes on to say, which I'm paraphrasing here, that my family told me that in order to be the good girl, I need to study well. That in order to be the good girl, I need to be obedient and never question, which I did. That in order to be the good girl, I need to choose and study this particular stream, which I did. That in order to be the good girl, I needed to get married to the family, to the man that my family selected, that my father and mother selected, which I also did. I was further told that in order to be the good girl, I needed to become a mother, which I also did. And then there were rules about being a good mother, which I also did. To me, following all rules and regulations and norms, which I also did. And yet, today I'm having to fight to keep my own children with me. Today I'm having to fight the state to get my children back. Where did I fail as a good girl that I've got to fight so much, that I've got to suffer so much, that I've got to feel humiliated to such a degree? I did everything. And over here in this movie, she's probably playing the role of a woman who's in her mid or late 30s, who's explicitly saying, all I was trying to do was to be a good girl, to play the role of a good girl. And if playing this good girl role gave me all of these things, do I need to question whatever was taught to me? Do I need to question my beliefs? Do I need to question my own intelligence? Do I need to question everybody's intelligence who gave me this information, which formed this belief system? Do I need to question my own authenticity or inauthenticity? Was I just playing a role through these beliefs of a good girl? Or am I actually a good girl? And if I could have my own understanding of what makes a good girl, would I change the previously existing narrative that was passed down to me, that was handed over to me? In a similar way, if we consider another movie, Ek Main Aur Ek Tu, wherein Imran Khan is essentially playing the good boy's role. And he is such a good boy that he even irons his socks. That he is so perfect that he almost comes across as controllingly robotic about himself. That he is so imprisoned and captivated and captured by his parents' thoughts and ideologies, which is showcased in small glimpses through the movie, in the movie, wherein we can see that even when he is moved outside of his home and is living in a different country, he can still hear his parents' thoughts. He can still visualize his parents speaking to him, very passively criticizing him, very passively picking at him to the point that he needs to be perfect, wherein he can't make a single mistake, wherein even his socks and probably his undergarments also need to be ironed, be creaseless, be absolutely smooth, so as not to be able to find a single flaw or a fault over there. And in very indirect ways, it's also telling us that within this family's culture, it's not that just the standards were exceptionally high, inhumanly high, unrealistically high, but it's also telling us that people did not have the choice to make any mistakes, the choice to falter, and in a way, quite literally telling us that within this family and the culture of this family, people did not have the privilege to just be humans. For there's a beautiful quote in English that says, "It's human to err." And when we do not allow ourselves to err, it tells us that we do not accept imperfections. It also tells us that we do not accept ourselves and others completely with their whole humanity. And then it also tells us that love, whether it's self love or love towards others, is also exceptionally, hugely conditional. That acceptance and belonging and thereby safety within this family and its culture is hugely, exceptionally, and maybe even burdensomely conditional. However, I'd also say that it's a perfect environment for robotic species, for mechanized species, that till the time the program is running well, it cannot go wrong unless a virus corrupts it, unless a virus destroys it. And I'm not talking about the virus in the movie Three Idiots, or a virus that disrupts this belief system that everything needs to be perfect, that everything needs to be flawless, that everything needs to be faultless, and anything that is not accepted. And then from that perspective, it's a very unforgiving environment. Unforgiving on a very personal level and on very interpersonal levels as well. It's a very non compassionate environment. It's a very non empathetic environment, both on a very personal level and on the interpersonal level as well. Now let's consider another movie, PK, wherein Anushka Sharma, when she stops being the good girl as Jagu, wherein she starts to disagree with her parents' thoughts and ideologies and belief system, she quite literally is rejected from the family. Either she's thrown out or she's made to feel so much of an outsider that she quite literally is forced to move out. Where her own father, who used to applaud for her when she was a kid, whose chest would swell with pride, whose head would be held with pride when she was a kid, when she would accomplish some things, as a result of which he felt proud of himself, of this product that he had created, quite literally tells her that he is ashamed of her, ashamed that she is his daughter, because she did not agree with his value systems, with his belief systems, because she was disrupting his belief systems, because she was not playing by his rules, were also informed by somebody else's ideologies, essentially of a religious guru, which had entered his own head and thereby had gotten embodied in his body to then become his own. And since these principles, these beliefs formed a large part of his identity, of what he recognized himself through, what he recognized himself with, when challenged, felt threatening to him, felt dangerous to him. And when it felt like that, when He felt challenged. He cut off ties with his own daughter, whom at one point in time he had felt extremely proud of. Now, even if we consider the movie Three Idiots, we'll notice that Kareena Kapoor Khan as Pia, that Madhavan as Farhan Qureshi, that Chatur, and even Raju Rastogi are all trying extremely hard to be the good boys and the good girls, even when they know for a chunk of their lifetime that they have lived up till now, they feared being an outsider within their own families, for they feared being rejected and criticized by their own families, for they feared being an outsider within their own families, for they did not want the same thing to happen to them with what had happened with Jaggu in the movie PK. Even if we look at the movie Thappad, we'll notice the similar thing, wherein all along, till Tapsi Pannu gets slapped by her husband, is essentially trying to be the good girl. Good girl, exactly like the way Mrs. Chatterjee was trying to be in the movie Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway. In a similar way, a similar thing has been shown in the movie Assi, wherein this lady's husband, who's fighting for her justice against sexual assault that is done on her, finds her husband backing her, finds herself being supported by her husband. And unfortunately, when this husband asks for some kind of a support from his own brother, he is quite explicitly told to not get into these kind of things, to drop the case, to not make a family issue into a bawal, to not ruin the family's reputation, to try and be the good boy that everybody expects him to be, and to stop being the man who supports his wife. And unfortunately, in order to support his own life partner, at that point in time, he had to choose to let go of his family ties. He had to choose to let go from the family's belief systems, of whatever entailed him to remain the good boy that the family demanded of him, so that he could finally step up as the man, as the individual that he wanted to be, wholly and completely and authentically. And many a times we'll realize that it is these subconscious beliefs of what makes a good boy and a good girl, and what are the punishments or the repercussions that we'll get if we don't adhere to these norms of the good boy and the good girl that we are scared to face, are essentially the ones that are out of our awareness in our subconscious, that are running our lives, that are making our life choices for us, which keeps us stuck, which keeps us in the familiar repeating loops, that does not allow us to outgrow them because we've never questioned them, because we are afraid of the consequences, or rather, the inner child, the child inside of us, who at one point in time must have been punished, is afraid of the similar consequences or punishments being meted out all over again, and believes that it's incapable of growing out, of outgrowing those beliefs, of disrupting those beliefs. Which is why it's first necessary to have insight, to bring it to our awareness, to bring it into our conscious awareness, to then truly be able to make an autonomous, authentic choice. So let's try and see our own patterns that might be habitually repeating themselves without the desired consequences that we actually desire for ourselves, that we actually want for ourselves. Let's even see where we feel stuck in life and the things that keep coming us that makes us feel stuck. Let's even see where we get triggered, for there's quite naturally something within our subconscious that is lying dormant, but gets activated when a certain thought or a belief or our identity with regards to it gets activated. Let's gather some more insights, some more data about ourselves through these aspects, through these questions, so that it first comes into our eyesight, into our vision, into our periphery, to then start getting some kind of insights about them. Let's try and do that for ourselves, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.